Welcome back, everybody. Time again for another episode of CRM Radio Today. With the man who has all the answers today and tomorrow. Paul Peterson from GoldMine. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Paul Roberts. How are you?
I'm good. You sound deep in a bunker somewhere there. You're barely coming through there. All the 50 feet of...
Hold on. Hold on a second.
He's got all that concrete and reinforced rebar in this deep hole in the ground. He's got a big bunker. He's coming to us from the command center there. You still there?
I'm still here.
All right. Well, while we're trying to get Paul back on the air here, tell us where you're holed up at these days. This is Kevin Smith from GoldMine.
Yeah, I'm holed up in just outside of Toronto, Ontario, in a little suburb called Burlington.
How is it in little suburbs? Or is it, and how is it in big cities like Toronto? Is Toronto? All the big cities seem to be getting hit the hardest with this coronavirus.
Yeah, it's true. We've been hit pretty hard. Unfortunately, in the retirement residence and the nursing homes seem to be hit the hardest. Even in the rural communities, they seem to be hit really hard. So that's very sad. But other than that, people, I think, generally are managing.
Well, we're taping this at the end of April, and there's some hope on the horizon. Maybe we're going to start reopening and test the waters, see what's out there. You guys are going to talk about that today.
Yeah, I think I'm back, right?
I think you're back. We got you back, and you had to go up and open up the blast-proof doors there above his.
I'm not sure what happened, and this would be a tip for working at home. And I think we've talked about this before. Is test your technology. Make sure you know. So there was something new I added to the equation, and it didn't quite work. In any event. I kind of had some trepidation about today a little bit because everybody talking about working from home and so forth. But as I move amongst my neighbors and colleagues, and there are a lot of people who don't work at home as a rule. And Kevin Smith, who's a regional manager, he started at GoldMine before I did and actually worked for Maximizer. So he's actually Mr. CRM and he's our big tips and tricks guy. But we were talking about that there are many people who aren't used to, like Paul, for you to run a studio, off your dining room table. It's very hard, right? There are many factors involved. It's okay if you're home early for an hour and you're just returning a few calls, right? But when you have to run your whole business. And I was just taken aback by when you watch the Today Show or the nightly news, all the people at home. Where are they getting all these cameramen and camera equipment? They must be running around. So I think we're going to have to test all those cameramen to make sure that they're all good.
It's definitely not easy.
So let's talk. So we have Kevin Smith with you, and Kevin and I have worked together. We just started just before the year, the calendar 2000, so that was a big deal. We thought planes were going to fall out of the sky and things like that, right? And Kevin and I have been working at home. So I was going to ask, Kevin has done a couple of webinars for us. One was on technology and what options you have for helping your workforce work from home. And then last week you did one on some tips and tricks. But I wanted to ask Kevin, when you've worked at home 20-some years, as have I, what attracted you to that aspect of a job as opposed to being around people? And what principles have you used to be, successful? And you've been our top sales rep for not every year, certainly, close to it, made President's Club and whatnot, and all working out of the bedroom of your home. So what made you successful?
It made me sound like a hermit, or I like that way of living. I'm holed up in a cave somewhere up in Canada for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw your office, buddy, so
that's true. That's true. Well, what attracted me to it, well, it wasn't so much an attraction, to be honest. It was rather just really something that just happened, right? At the time, I was working for another software company. They went through a reorganization, and basically what happened was there was some of our sales staff had to work from home. And some people can't embrace it. They struggle with it. I actually embraced it. I liked it. I frankly felt that instead of spending an extra hour and a half or 2 hours, driving into the city, I was able to put that time to good use, calling prospects, following up on customers, and so forth. So it can actually really increase efficiency and productivity in your day if I think you follow some standard tips and tricks and tools and be well organized and think about it in a productive way rather than in a negative way. So that's kind of how it came about for me. And I think there's some real key considerations that successful organizations take on when they're essentially getting these employees to work at home. And I think there's some technology considerations, but there's also some physiological considerations that you have to be aware of as well. So you want to make sure that you have good equipment, right? A good phone system, at Avante, we happen to have a really good web conferencing system, so we can do demos and so forth of our software. But if you're in other businesses, it's really important to have good technology, a good Bluetooth headset. It seems simple, but it's important, right? You want that quality. And you don't want your customers or prospects to know that you're essentially working from home. So these are important things. And I think even from a manager perspective, you got to make sure that you're not micromanaging your people as well, too.
Yeah, we talked about that, it's very easy to have a staff meeting and everybody walks into the room and says howdy, but now managers, too, they have to do the phoning around, right? Checking in with people, chats. You can have your weekly call, of course, but during a time like this, especially when you're dealing with people who are out of the office, it's helpful to have that little extra touch. And you'd mentioned technology, and I think one of the things that we found when my kids went home, they didn't have the right monitors. I've mentioned that, right? So a simple thing, they're not all that expensive, but they weren't raised, or they were used to working with 2 or 3 monitors. Having a good internet connection, for example. At home, it's one thing, right? You're streaming a couple of shows, but when you're doing emails and teleconferencing and all that, make sure you have a good internet, reliable, good bandwidth, right? Those are all good groundwork things when you work at home. What are some of the other, you mentioned I can't even say it, so I'll let you.
Just some of the things that even you mentioned, right? Just even something like having good monitors, multiple monitors perhaps. Something as silly as people are sitting down all day, right? And I was talking to my neighbor, a little funny story, and he's never worked at home. And last week he was saying that he was kind of struggling a little bit. He said, Kevin, you've been doing this for 25 years. How do you do it? How have you survived doing this? It's driving me crazy. It's only been 3 weeks. And I said, well, you have to treat this like it's going into the office. So you have a coffee break at 10:30. Continue to take that coffee break. Get up, stretch your legs, go for a walk. Little things like that make a difference. Even stuff as simple as standing up, sticking a towel under your arm for your mouse pad. I do that quite often because my arms sometimes get sore. But just make sure it's extremely comfortable and get into a routine, right? We're all creatures of routine, and set up a bit of a routine for yourself. It can make a big difference.
One of the guys that I used to work with at Symantec, he would, now this is probably a little bit over extreme, he would get up, he'd put on his white shirt and his tie, and he'd sit at his desk. Now, this is before conference calls, but he dressed every day as if you were about to head into the office. And for him, that was putting on the game suit. And same for me. I try to hit my desk at the same time every day, and then you get your things done and then go upstairs and have your coffee or, play with the cat for a little bit or whatever. So what are some of the challenges that you've had recently, or has anything changed with this from your perspective?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, so really it's been really not that much different than what I've been doing for many, many years. What I do find, though, is interesting, Paul, is I now have to consider that my prospects and customers are working from home. So working from home for me is one thing, but now I got to realize that, hey, the people that I'm talking to are sitting in an office, in their kitchen, or in their basement, and that's a different approach to how you address things with them as well, too. So, one of the things from a CRM perspective, you want to make sure you got really good, relevant information in your CRM tool, right? So this might be a good opportunity to, maybe send out an email to your customers or prospects and saying, hey, have we got the most up-to-date information about you, right? We know your office number, we know your office address and so forth, but do you have a different phone number at home? Do you have a different phone number? Perhaps you're holed up at the cottage or some other place, right? So it's important now to think about this a little bit different. It's not just about you. It's about your customers and prospects, because you can pretty much assume a large percentage of them are going to be just like you now.
And if you hear noise in the background and things like that, it's okay. Dogs barking, it's actually now kind of a little bit of a badge of honor that you're there. And for people working at home who have kids, it's important not to share your stress with them, right? Find some place where you can get your quiet time for work without disrupting the kids, because it's very stressful on them as well as they. And I know
we all have distractions, right? Absolutely. I mean, it's a great point. I mean, we have to kind of accept that, right? Not only on our side, but on our customers and prospects sides. There's going to be distractions. There's going to be perhaps a delivery guy at the door, or like you said, dog coming running in, or your 6-year-old asking you how to do algebra.
So Eddie, Paul Roberts. Now you've been going into the studio, and have you seen any trends in your friends or other sponsors that they've talked about with working from home situations?
I see lots of people interested in the idea, and I'm wondering how much of it's going to stick after we're allowed to go back. In other words, will people once they find out how nice it is, will they like it? Does it add, as you're saying, more productivity and stuff, or will they just go back to old habits? What do you guys think?
Yeah, the new future, right? And I kind of hate to see that because so much work. I mean, a couple of years ago, right, Yahoo shut down its work at home policies and said everybody into the office, right? Because they were in a business where you have to collaborate, and you can't. I find it's hard to collaborate over the phone or in a 30-minute fixed phone call. Sometimes collaboration is leaning over a cube and talking to somebody and things like that, right? So I think there are businesses where collaboration is going to be important. I think for some of the salespeople, once they get settled up, if they're successful and can make it, at Arthur Young, for example, a CPA firm, they used to have a desk for every employee, and they said, why are we buying all these desks? You're all supposed to be at clients, right? So they went from 100 desks for 100 people to 20, right? And you checked in. So now that happened a long time ago, hoteling, whatever you want to call it, right? But I think you're going to see more of that, where there's going to be less in the office and more requirements for some people to, stay at home. And like Kevin said, if you don't have a 2-hour commute and you can make more phone calls or just stop work at 5 o'clock and get upstairs and have dinner with your family without being stressed, those are all benefits that I think a lot of people, as you point, might want to keep with.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I hear over and over again is people feel like they're making more phone calls now that they're at home, but they feel like they're connecting less. In other words, it's easy to communicate from home, and maybe it's quicker and maybe get more phone calls done, but somehow they're used to that interpersonal sitting across, going to the client's office, taking him to lunch, sitting in an office with a buzz around it here, and I don't know that there's something about that, except that's the way they feel. Well,
and a gentleman next to me is a vice president for a pipe and tube company, okay? Classic American, right? They make pipe and tubes for construction and factories and all that. His salespeople are used to that very thing, dropping in with the purchasing agent and talking about what's coming next month. So it's formal in that they're trying to hit these people every month. It's informal that when you get there, hey, what are you thinking about? What's going on? How did that threading device work? All that's gone. Can you live without that? And he's saying, we can live without a lot of it. I mean, we can still get that information in other ways. So I think there's going to be more folks trying to look for that. But we are a social animal, right? So we strive to get back together. So I work at home. It's great to be productive on the phone, but I love to get to the gym, and that's where I meet other adults, right?
Yeah, right.
Get to talk. So for me, it's that.
Perfect example. Why do we have to go to a gym? Why can't you just get to stuff and work at home? We've all tried it. It doesn't work. I need some motivation. I need somebody pushing me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so some of that going to the office does help, but the other side of that is, so for sales, it's kind of easy. You were talking about phone calls, and I was on a think tank call a couple of weeks ago, and somebody who has wide stats, Convergys for call centers, found that even though they'd sent many call center people home, attempts were up. Most of us expected them to go down. Connections were a little bit lower, as you pointed out. But when they got through, they were able to spend a little bit more time, which is always a good thing with a client, to chat about some stuff. So from a productivity standpoint, sending folks home did not alter what they were capable of delivering, right, in terms of capacity. And I think we're through the first segment. We're talking with Kevin Smith, Region Manager for GoldMine and CRM tips and tricks guru. We're going to come back and maybe talk a little bit about the CRM aspect of this, about what can you do to prepare for the reopen. So, Paul, we'll break for a commercial here and then come back and talk with Kevin.
We know you rely on your CRM system, and it's usually a love-hate relationship. Most CRM systems, well, let's face it, they're expensive. They're hard to understand. People don't use them properly. And you're probably paying for features that you don't even want. If that's your case, then maybe it's time to simplify. It's time to get more from your CRM. Why don't you go back to the original? Trust GoldMine. We helped pioneer the industry, after all. GoldMine CRM is, well, it's simple, it's affordable, and it's proven. If all those sound appealing to you, if you're just tired of the CRM headaches that you're getting from trying to implement something that's just too complicated, too expensive, and too much for you to figure out, then why not go back to the original? Visit GoldMine today, goldmine.com.
Oh, I love that commercial.
A little bit. You might be a little bit subjective there, Paul. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's get into some nuts and bolts. I mean, Kevin, and from a CRM perspective, so we've used GoldMine, and in fact, I used it before I joined GoldMine at a couple of companies, and it always, like you said, there was a place to go where I could find the information I wanted, whether it was directions to their plant or somebody's birthday or the last time we heard from them. That's the favorite thing I do. If I hear from a client, I look this last hear from this person, how recent the interaction is. But what are some other things that you can suggest using your CRM that we use GoldMine for to keep things going while we're all working from home? Well, anything different that you would do or recommend?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's interesting. You brought up you've been using GoldMine, many years ago, and it's been around for a long time. And the one thing you kind of alluded to is it's interesting that some of the basic things that CRM did, we called it contact management back in the day, if you recall, Paul. But contact management was about having an organized calendar, right? It was about having good information about, the basics of your prospects and customers. It was about being able, to track emails and associate those interactions, emails, meetings, and so forth to those accounts. The basics. And it's, I think, frankly, more relevant in this kind of an environment, right? Because it's so critical that we have that good information in the system. And I touched on it a little bit earlier. Our prospects and customers might not necessarily be sitting in the office, right? So it's important to have good basic information. And being at home, you might have a couple of more hours during the day now, if sales are down a little bit or what have you. One of the tips might be just, frankly, to go in and clean up your database. Go in and touch on those customers and prospects that maybe you haven't touched on in 6 months or 9 months, and find out. It's a good excuse, frankly, to pick up the phone, give them a call, and say, "Hey, are you working from home? What's a good contact number to reach you at? Is your email changed?" and so forth. So just the simplicity stuff of getting that information, getting updates, logging that in your system. It's a great time to do that.
And I think the other point to that too is that so often, I'm a list-driven person, right? You wake up at Sunday night, what do I have to accomplish this week? And every day it's like, what do you have to do? And a GoldMine Contact Manager can let you do that, right? If you talk to that client and they want you to check back in 30 days, whatever, make sure you set that follow-up item, and then you can move on. You can forget about it, knowing that it's going to pop up at the appropriate time, and maybe with some notes about what you talked about so you can carry it on. Most importantly, too, is that if you do that, right, others in the company can see what you just did. So if you happen to be, if you're not available, somebody else can see the notes that you made and kind of pick up the conversation or, get a glimpse of how serious it is. So that's something a lot of salespeople don't like to do, is put those in many big CRMs. They're just doing it for forecasting and roll-ups, right? So which is important. But the activity list to keep the individual productivity, that's a great way to make sure that you're not forgetting something, so that when things get busy, you've got your list of things queued up, ready to go.
Yeah, that's a great segue, because my next point I was going to talk about was just kind of those things, right? Like being able to schedule activities out in the future and do those things. But even more importantly, Paul, is we don't have the situation now where you're sitting at your desk and Karen or Sam or Mike is 3 desks down and you have something for them to do and it's important and it's critical, and you just walk over and say, "Hey, make sure that we get that report or that proposal out by the end of the day." So one of the nice things about some of the CRM tools, GoldMine happens to do this beautifully, it's something that I use quite often, I did one today actually for you, is this whole idea of task delegation. So we have something in GoldMine called RSVP. So
right.
As simple as when I delegate something to, for instance, you, like I did this morning, I just put a little checkbox on where I say RSVP, and when you actually complete that phone call, I get a notification that it's been completed. But, Paul, in this kind of environment, that is so helpful and useful. Even though we're not in the same office or what have you, I know when you complete that activity, I get a notification. That's really great information, and it helps me, move along in my day with all the activities and other things that I have to do.
That's one of those tips that it's hard when you pick a CRM or use one. You do it for some strategic reason, like I said, forecast roll-ups. But when you look at that, that's where it helps the individual. The other thing that, and I'll say it, the little hidden thing GoldMine does, if you schedule those RSVPs, yes, I get notified when you did it. So, you go, "Oh, great, thanks." But you can also get a list of things not completed. So now you don't have to go searching about who you asked. You can go to the RSVPs not completed, and you can see which items were assigned that you haven't heard back on. And so now you can focus your follow-up based on how important it is, right? So that's a little practical tip.
We're all delegating more, right? In this kind of an environment, it's just a reality. It's not like we're doing anything less, but that kind of feedback, it's not face to face anymore, but it's still there, right? And it's important.
And you talked about cleaning the database, which would be eliminating duplicates, seeing who's there. Maybe, like you said, double checking on, make sure you've categorized your clients somehow. We do that a lot, right? We like to know who's a lead, who's a partner, who's a customer, who's a past customer or expired customers, right? So we have some high-level categories that we can deal with for marketing purposes. But you can then maybe browse down. Hey, find me all the big customers in Toronto area. I'm going to reach out to them, right? And something like GoldMine.
That have placed an order in the last 6 months or something like that. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and GoldMine has always allowed end users to do some of that on their own. So with other systems, you often have IT write a query for you, which is fine. But it's great when you can manipulate your data that way itself. When things open up, we've been talking a little bit that actually for many people working from home in this crisis isn't much different than others. But have you thought about our business is driven, I'll say, by smaller enterprises, small to mid-sized businesses? What do you think is going to happen when things reopen, Kevin? I mean, for the suppliers of other businesses, does CRM play a role in that, or is it just going to be the same, just pent-up demand and everybody trying to rush to fill it?
Well, let's hope it's more of a V-shaped recovery than a long U-shaped recovery. But there's much smarter people than myself that can anticipate that. But at the end of the day, one way or the other, we're going to have to embrace tools that are going to make us more efficient, whether we're working at home or whether we're back in the office, because there will be a pickup for sure, right? It's just the volume, and we'll continue to have to do more with less. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations have restructured. They're working with less people. Salespeople, for example, are expected to do more because of cutbacks or what have you, and you need tools to make you, frankly, more productive and more efficient. So, some of the things that you touched on, right, like being able to have a very organized day, right? These are the 25 calls I need to do today. These are the 15 quotes that I need to get out. Having a very structured system that keeps you organized and keeps you focused is going to be critical when we come out of it.
And I think we're about out of time, so we had some good tips here about having the right tools and technology, and first test them out, make sure that they work for you and you understand them. We talked about structure and working at home. If you're used to working in an office full of people, make sure you do some socializing, right? Call other coworkers periodically. Ideally not the carp, but how you doing? I always ask people what they're watching on Netflix or something, and I've had people send me bird photos to help them identify or whatnot, and pay attention to those sorts of things. From CRM, I think what's really any work you do now that's in the future, you have to make sure that you know when to follow up on that. So if your client tells you, hey, we'll know more in June, put a little reminder to chat with them in June, sort of thing, right?
And use this time effectively, like we were saying. Like this could be a good time to get that KYC information. We refer to it as know your client, not KSC, Paul, like KYC, right? Know your client. This might be an excellent time to gather that information and update it.
Yep. So, well, Kevin, thanks for joining us today. Good luck, and always, Kevin and I talk usually every day as a team and about things, so that keeps things going. We've got good technology, and we can answer questions. So if somebody out there would like to know how we handle this or that, or share information, or what we loaded into our database so that we know what's going on, we'd be happy to share that with you at goldmine.com. Kevin, if you got any questions for Kevin, you can reach him at kevin.smith@goldmine.com. And, of course, I am Paul Peterson at paul.peterson@goldmine.com. We've got some spring, and so I'll close with our usual, which is Surf's Up.
You've been listening to another example of CRM Today right here on the Funnel Radio Network for at-work listeners like you.